Hi everyone, I hope this finds you doing well. I wanted to show some enhancements to Illuminated Cloud support for SOSL, the Salesforce Object Search language. If you're not familiar with SOSL, you're almost certainly familiar with SOQL, the Salesforce Object Query language, that lets you query your S objects and their fields and their relationships as a relational database. SOSL is similar in that it can be used statically and dynamically within Apex and executed as standalone queries, but instead of querying the relational database, it queries search indexes, textual search indexes that are maintained automatically by Salesforce for things like name fields and also your own S-object fields that you opt in to being searchable. And so the syntax is a little different. The use cases are a little bit different. Although the line gets a little blurry between them these days, especially with things like Shield's data at rest encryption, which puts constraints on the ability to filter and order result sets by encrypted fields in SOQL. Sometimes SOSL can help out there. But the mechanisms can be very similar. Now, with all that preface aside, the reality is that Illuminated Cloud has historically, pretty much since the very beginning, had support for SOSL, but it's been very lackluster relative to the support for SOQL. And as I'm hopefully going to show in this demo, SOSL support has been brought up to very close to parity, if not exact parity, with SOQL in how you can interact with it, the types of static code analysis you get against it as you write it, the quality of code completion, things like that. So why don't we go ahead and just dive in. So this is actually just a little test harness I made for myself on one of my demo projects. And we're going to ignore the red we see for now. We're going to come back to that, but as just a quick preview, that's going to have to do with some of the static code analysis, the code inspections have been added for SOSL. But I want to just say generally there are three different contexts in which a SOSL query can execute. There's same three contexts in which SOQL can execute. A static query in Apex, so really a query expression in a square bracketed expression context, and it's a static preformed query other than, say, a bind expression used as a value. A dynamic query, you actually build the query yourself as a string, and you pass it in this case to search.query, search.find, search.suggest, very similar to what you can do with SOQL with database.query in its variants. And then the third one is what you can do in, like, say, a SOQL query editor, like the SOQL query tool window, where you can execute a standalone query. You can view the results in Illuminated Cloud's SOQL query tool editor, both in a tabular format and in a hierarchical format. If you've queried relationships as well, you can save and load those queries. You can copy them to the clipboard as tabular and as JSON data. It's a multi-tabbed interface, this type of a utility. And that's existed for SOQL, and it's existed for anonymous Apex as scripting languages, and now it also exists for SOSL queries. And so let me just go ahead and get rid of this, and we'll start over. So it is a multi-tabbed interface. If it looks familiar, it's because it's built on the exact same tool window framework that I built for the other scripting languages, and so it's going to have all the same features. You can point it at whatever connection you want. You can rename your tabs. You can add multiple tabs. You can save and load script files. You can set your various language-specific settings, and you can write queries, of course. So let's just go ahead and do that very quickly. So we're going to go ahead and say find, and I'm going to put in, I want to find con, because I know some of the data in this org contains, in a case-insensitive manner, a substring of con in some of its searchable fields. And that should be sufficient just to go ahead and execute. So I'm going to execute it, and we should see that we get search results here in just a moment. So we did, and I didn't specify any specific fields, any specific S-object types, so it searched all S-object types and all of their fields, and since I didn't specify any fields I want to return, it's returning the IDs of the matching rows. So we can see we got one opportunity, one contact, one account, a bunch of contacts, one campaign. I can keep going and going. In fact, you can see this more clearly in the tree view, where it's partitioned automatically by the S object type. And we can see up here that the result of a SOQL query is a list of S objects. So each of these constituent lists is for one individual S object type. It's the results for that S object type. And then you have a list of those. That's effectively what you're looking at here. And it's effectively what you're looking at here, flattened out and turned into the union set of the queried fields. So why don't we take a look at what that looks like? So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. We're going to see that we have other clauses we can add. So I'm going to say in, let's say, just the name fields, and we can go ahead and query that, and we'll see that we can really get the same results because we didn't specify we want any additional fields. And now we can specify that we want only a subset of those objects. So let's say account and contact and opportunity. We'll leave the other ones. And I'm going to go ahead and execute that. And we can see that we now got, go ahead and flatten this, one account, 16 contacts, and one opportunity, but we still only have IDs. Well, just like in a lot of the other areas in Illuminated Cloud, when you have commented delimited lists, you can ask Illuminated Cloud to place them on individual lines or back on the same line. So those types of context actions exist. And in fact, if I reformat the entire query now, the individual clauses, because it now sees it as being a multi-line query, the individual clauses are going to be put one per line. That can all be configured in the Apex SOSL code formatter settings. But let's go ahead and say that we want different fields. So we add parens here, and I'm going to say that I want ID and name. See, code completion is working nicely. And contact, I just want name. And let's actually only have, let's say limit, say 5. And in fact, we'll go ahead and say order by, say name. And for opportunity, we'll say we just want the name. And let's execute again. And now we're seeing what we've asked for. So accounts, we got one result. We got ID and name. Contact, we got 5 results, and we only got the names. That's what we asked for. And they are in alphabetical order by name. And opportunity, we got 1, and we only got the name. So you can see that this is a quick way and an easy way to test your SOSL queries and kind of flesh them out. And you know, if we had other clauses, we could add other clauses. I could put a total limit on it of 5, and we can see that we lost 3 of our. It's across all the object types, so we lost 3 of our contacts there. So you can basically keep constraining, adding where clauses, order by, whatever you want to, change the set of fields that are queried. Your expression can actually be more complex, so you could say something like foo and bar or baz. And so that can be your expression in your search term effectively, and it can be complex as well. And we'll show actually more about the search term in just a second. So hopefully that gives you the idea. Let's skip back over to the oh, actually one other thing I want to show there is if I go to save this, you'll see that I'm sorry, that's rename tab. If I go to save this, you'll see that it says SOSL file, star.sosl. So Illuminated Cloud now has a first-class notion of star.sosl files as being SOSL query, standalone SOSL query files, same way star.socl and star.apex for those scripting languages. And in fact, if we say star.sosl, I've got another script over here, and if you're working with one of those files, you can easily send it to the tool window for execution by just saying execute in SOSL Query or open in SOSL Query, and you can see that it just opened as another tab. It's a name tab. It's tied to that file, and we can see the results here, tabular and hierarchical, and we can even copy these, copy this out. I'll put it into a plain text file. We can see that it's obviously some type of delimited file here. As we can see, if you're in a commercial ID, I can right click and say edit as table. If you're in a free community edition ID, you won't have this feature. So this tab separated values in the first row is a header, and you can see that we now actually have a nice representation of it for actually working with this within the IDE, similar to Excel. You can also just copy paste this directly into Excel, and it'll pick it up as tabular data. And then similarly with the tree-based view, I can come over here and I can copy this, and it's going to copy out as JSON just like it does for SOSL query results, hierarchical results. And so now we have them partitioned by the object types. So again, it worked like this for SOSL. It works exactly like this for SOSL. That's the whole point. And so let's go back over to our SOSL test, and let's take a look at these red underlines that we kind of ignored earlier. So this is part of the syntax validation and semantic validation that you're going to get for SOSL queries. So for example, in an Apex context, whether it is a static query or a dynamic query, you must specify the actual object types. It's not going to allow you to do this from Apex and say query every single S object in the system. So again, we've got context actions, quick fixes, so add a returning clause. So we'll go ahead and say that we want to query contacts. You can see that problem goes away. Same thing down here in a dynamic query, except here we'll query account and opportunity, and you can see that it fixed that. The next one's different though. So you saw that when we did our search term in the SOSL tool window that it was using curly braces. You can see up here it's using a string literal, an Apex string literal. Well, in Apex, in static Apex, a static query expression, it has to be in in a string literal in quotes. And so I can actually go ahead and do that. It can also be a bind expression, but if you're actually doing it as an inline expression, it has to be a string literal. So very quick to change to that. If we went back over here and I were to change this to be the Apex format, it gives you a similar quick fix to change it to the appropriate query expression, brace query expression for this context. So it'll help you fix that. The rest of these so far are going to be pretty much variants on the exact same thing. If we go to the bottom, we can see that because it is obviously making sure that that references are resolvable, it's saying that it doesn't know what knowledge article version is and what these fields on it are, and it's because this org didn't have the knowledge feature enabled, the knowledge base feature enabled. And so it's telling you that this query won't work against this org. So exactly what you'd expect, and it's just working. There may be other validation rules that I'll add. Those are the ones that exist right now. Obviously anything that says that something is grammatically incorrect, if I say foo, that's going to get flagged as being improper. If I leave off the square bracket, or I say xxx here, YYY, then it's going to say that that's to label expected. So basically the parser is going to get that, but you should get significantly better validation, both semantic and grammar compliance. So let's talk about writing these queries, and let's go back to the query editor now, and I'm going to open a new tab. So if I were in the SOSL query editor and I created a new tab, I could prototype a query very quickly by using a live template, SEL, and then I can just go ahead and say account, and I want ID, and if I want to start adding other fields, I could. Well, the same thing has been added for SOSL, and so if I say find, you'll see that there's find for the keyword, which is what I used earlier, but there's also this one with a rubber stamp beside it, and that's the live template for find, and it's going to produce, as the text shows there, a standalone SOSL query. So if I hit tab, it's going to walk me through this. What subset of fields do I want to query? Well, I'll say name fields, and let's say that I just want contact right now. We'll come back to it, and I'm going to query con. We showed that got results earlier, and there we go. So that was very quick to do it, and at this point I could start adding other clauses, other object types, things like that. So that's a standalone query. Let's go to the anonymous Apex window here, and let's take a look at how we can do this something similar in Apex. Again, if you were doing SOSL queries, and let's say you wanted to run a query and output the results of that query to the debug log, I could say SD, and then I could say SQ, so a SOSL query expression, and then I could just say account and select ID, and I could execute that, and then I've got debug only filtering here, and I can see the IDs of the accounts that were actually retrieved. Well, I can do something similar. So let's say SD, and everything that would have been SQ before, use SS. Instead of SOSL query, it's SOSL search. So SS, and you can see this is going to be a SOSL query as an Apex query expression, and so we get the same thing. We'll say name fields, returning contact, and again we'll go with our good old con, execute this, and we can see the same thing. We got our contacts that match that, but because we didn't specify that we wanted any particular fields here, we only have the ID. If instead I said name and did that and executed it, we'll have our names right there, and of course the ID always comes back with the object. Let's say we wanted to actually take the results of this and we wanted to use them for something else. Of course, I can use refactoring. I can pull this out into a local variable, and let's say that we want to do that in a single step instead of having to do the SS as a query expression and then do the extract variable refactoring. So I can do SSV just like SQV, and that's going to go ahead and do a SOSL query expression assigned to a local variable of the correct type. So I'm going to say name fields, exact same thing we did above, and con, and it is putting it into a uniquely named variable of the correct type given the current declaration scope. And so now we have that. And now let's say that we wanted to work with the results of this. We wanted to iterate through the results of it. So I'm going to use iter, and so we'll choose results 2. That's the closest one to us. And so our loop variable for that is going to be result, but that is itself a list of S objects, so we need to continue to dig in. So we need to do a nested iteration. So we'll say result, and then we'll look at each S object in that, and then we could do something with that. So we could say something like SD JSON.serialize pretty SObj, right? And then, so let's say we wanted to do that whole thing in one step. That required like 4 different live templates, not counting what we did with printing out the results. So we just did SSV. Let's do SSIT, just like SQIT. So we want to iterate SOSL Query results. And so we're going to get a doubly nested loop here. Again, we're going to say name fields, and we're going to say contact, and I'm going to get con. And so loop variable name result is good. We'll name this one SObj, and here we are again. And I can just say SD JSON.serialize pretty and SObj. There's actually another way to do this, and that is to do SObj.sd j. And so that's a postfix template. So I just basically put the expression and then said dot, and then I used the template, in this case SDJ, for system debug JSON serialized pretty. So, but the point is, with very few keystrokes, we actually now are able to work with a a fairly simple, but at least a foundational SOSL query upon which we could build. So those are the live templates that have been added. So I think that's really it. I mean, hopefully that shows that this has been brought up from a feature-wise standpoint to be at the level that Anonymous Apex and SOSL Query have been, SOSL Query have been. I knew I was going to kind of use those interchangeably a little bit when I shouldn't be. But should bring those up to the same level. If you still see issues with it, if I miss something in grammar compliance, and I did, as in the process of doing this, I revisited the grammar from Salesforce's documentation, found a few small issues, one missing clause, and I ended up adding those. And I also made sure that code completion, as you saw here, code completion is working properly, references are resolving properly, the formatter was doing the right thing. So so if you see issues, let me know. I'll take care of them. Otherwise, I hope you find this useful. Certainly, if you're using SOSL to any extent, it should help you do that within Illuminated Cloud. Thank you very much for your time, and take care. Bye.